How important is beauty? Today we're doing a review on The Picture of Dorian Gray. This book was written back in 1854 by Oscar Wilde. And it's a very famous book written by a very famous author who never really went on to write any more literary works, no more books really. He did some plays, I believe, at least from what I've read in this version of the book, which I've already shown it here, but I'd like to point out it's the uncensored version of Dorian Gray. And this version of it actually has a lot of pages before the actual story, explaining how it came to pass, what happened to Oscar Wilde, his life, and why it's important to, our history. And this book is important to our history because Oscar Wilde was actually put in prison after he wrote this book, after it came out and people had written it, or people had read the book and were accusing him of sexual misconduct, things like that. And this was a time apparently where religion was coming back and being revived, and people didn't exactly agree with what Oscar Wilde had to say in his book. This is the story of a man who he makes pretty much like an out loud wish, and it pretty much comes true. And if you don't know the story, I can't really talk about the story much without giving away a lot of it, so I guess spoilers. But Dorian Gray is a young man at the start of the book. I think he's less than 20, and he has a friend named Basil Hallward, I believe, who is a painter. And he is obviously in love with Dorian, and he idolizes Dorian, and he paints Dorian all the time and is inspired by him. And these two have another friend called Lord Henry. And Dorian is obviously young and naive in the story, and he's very impressionable. And Lord Henry is a very cynical man who does what he wants and enjoys life, and really enjoys just kind of watching people's lives. And he finds that the most interesting thing. When Dorian meets Lord Henry tells him that youth and beauty are the most important things, and that once you lose those things, life is kind of just downhill from there. And as Dorian's eyes are open to these ideas from Lord Henry, he thinks to himself, I don't ever want to lose these things. And so he says out loud, I wish that all of my aging and my sins would go into this beautiful painting that Hallward has painted and not show up on me. And this comes true, and the rest of the story from there is him kind of living his life with Hallward and Henry, just their interactions and his life, and the fact that he never really ages, and his sins are being all put into this painting. So when he does sin, the painting becomes uglier, and I'm not saying his face becomes uglier in the painting, it's just his countenance, his actual expression on his face becomes more and more devil-like, I guess you could say. And this leads him to start questioning himself, what's really important in life. And by the end of the book, he has truly like started to like question everything, all of his decisions. Were they all wrong? Things like that. So my likes and my dislikes for this book. I liked the overall plot. I liked this thought that, you know, he could put his aging and his sins and his countenance, his face would always, like his face that was on his body, not in the painting, would always stay youthful and innocent, if you will. A lot of people would say that he looked innocent, even though they knew about like the dastardly things that he would do, because one of the things that he would do, because he knew that it would go into the painting, eventually he would make these bad decisions. He'd go out and just do all the worst things in the world. And he knew that he could get away with it, and his body would never take on those sins. And so people they didn't understand how to like deal with him in the book. And so a lot of people shunned him. The characters were pretty good. I liked them. Lord Henry, Dorian himself, and Basil. They were all good characters, all the way up till the end. The world building itself, I would have to say, it was just, it was decent. Oscar Wilde actually painted a very pretty picture of the surrounding world, what it was like during that time. And it was really well done, I would have to say. The writing itself is where I start like having some hiccups with this book. It's good writing. It's very wonderful writing for the most part. Like it's very descriptive, like how there's birds flitting in the leaves of the trees and things like that. It's very evocative. But then there are parts of the book, and this goes hand in hand with pacing, his writing and his pacing, where Oscar likes to describe a lot of things that are the same and just like throw like 3 pages at it in a row, where like Dorian, he's exploring his world around him, so he thinks about and researches and learns about gems and stones, and he just talks about all these different stones and gems and like what they mean and things like that for like a full page or even more. And Oscar kind of lost me on those parts, and it slowed down my reading, and it kind of hampered my enjoyment a lot. And that's kind of where I kind of fell off with this book, is there's a lot of parts that I felt were not like truly necessary in the book. And that would probably turn this book more into like a novella, which it's kind of getting there anyways. And it might actually have been a novella now that I'm thinking about it. I don't know how many pages the actual book is, because there's so many pages in this uncensored version of like history, which I actually enjoyed. I enjoyed reading the history of Oscar Wilde and his life, and how this book came to be about and what happened after. I thought that was actually all very interesting stuff. But the actual pacing of this book is what really threw me for a loop, and it took me forever to read it. And whereas I enjoyed the actual story and the ending and everything, I will say that the ending itself was not expected for me. I kind of knew what was going to happen. I won't say what exactly happened, but it just felt so abrupt. And I was like, whoa, okay, that's the end? All right. I can deal with that. But it just, there's little things that like made this not as an enjoyable a read as I thought it was going to be. So on this one, I'm actually only going to give this one 3 gnomes out of 5. It's one of my lowest ratings that I've had since I've started this channel. and started reading again, a lot in like the last 10 years. So I was kind of sad that it wasn't better than it was, especially with some of the people that I look up to that have read this. I thought, this is going to be a really, really, really good book. And, for those people, all the more power to you. Like, enjoy it. It just wasn't my favorite. It wasn't my cup of tea. And I'm a little bit sad that it wasn't better for me. So I hope you guys have fun, keep reading, and have a magical day.